John chapter 18. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron. There was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. So he asked them again, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you, I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word he spoke, "Of those who you gave me, I have not lost one." Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given to me?" So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. First they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had advised the Jews that it would be expedient that one man should die for the people. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Since that disciple was well known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest, but Peter stood outside the door. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door and brought Peter in. The servant girl at the door said to Peter, "You also are not one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the servants and the officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold. They were standing and warming themselves. Peter was also with them, standing and warming himself. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered him, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogues and in the temple, where all Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. They know what I have said." When he said these things, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered him, "If what I said is wrong, bear witness about the wrong. But if what I said is right, why do you strike me?" Annas then sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. So they said to him, "You also are not one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had just cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter again denied it. And at once a rooster crowed. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They did not enter the governor's headquarters, so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken, by what kind of death he was going to die. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or do others say it about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. My kingdom is not of this world. Then Pilate said to him, So you are a king? Jesus answered, You say that I am a king, for this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. And Pilate said to him, What is truth? After he had said this, he went outside to the Jews and told them, I find no guilt in him, but you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews? They cried out again, No, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. John chapter 18. I find this passage hard to read. There's such literary irony, such beautiful irony here in this passage as the guard strikes Jesus and says, Is this how you answer your high priest? Pilate asking Jesus, What is truth? There's just so much going on here. I find also beautiful, Judas comes with the band of soldiers and looking for Jesus. We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, they say. Jesus says, I am he. But Peter, when asked, Are you a disciple of Jesus, says, I am not. How Jesus knows who he is and claims it. He doesn't, even in the face of death, balk at the opportunity to declare who he is. He doesn't shy away from it. He owns who he is who he is, and even when it means that he'll die for claiming to be so, he will say, I am that man, I am this man, I am Jesus Christ. Peter, on the other hand, wants to be next to Jesus, wants to have courage, but when the test comes, he fails that test and says, I am not. Instead of, I am he, I am his disciple. And then we see later the restoration of Peter. I also find ironic here just how much the Jewish leaders care about things that don't matter at all. They're so concerned about keeping themselves holy for the Sabbath, they don't even go into Pilate's house. But here they are killing God. Sick that you can be that religious, that obsessed with religious spirit. And I pray that I'll never be that. I know there are moments where that happens. It happens for all of us, where we get so caught up in our systems that when God shows up that we don't see him and that we bypass him, and sometimes we even go against him because of our way of doing things. And this is the way that God's told us to do it in the past. We're not sensitive to what he's doing in the present. And nowhere is that more clear than in these passages here, where because of their own envy, jealousy, and pride, the Jewish leaders kill Jesus. And they do it for completely unjust reasons. Jesus even says, Why do you accuse me? For what do you accuse me? And they have no answer to this. Pilate has no answer to this. No one has any answer to this. They just want his head because he is stealing their glory. And that's what the whole book of John is trying to tell us about the Pharisees, and thereby about the world and us, that our tendency towards God is to ignore him when he shows up. But Jesus is the one sent into the world for you and for me. And when he shows up, we have to see him. And our eyes have to be open, and that only comes from faith. It only comes by believing in him. It only comes as a gift of God in the first place. And we're about to enter into John chapter 19, which is just another beautiful section of Scripture. But John chapter 18 sets it up perfectly with Barabbas, the man who should have gone to die. And then again, literary irony, Barabbas goes free, but Jesus dies in his place.